You wrote go, and you wagered for it.
For it. Go for it.
You certainly did. All right. I think we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Colton Layton, lead video editor for MMOHuts.com, and I am hijacking the stream from its usual host, Jason Parker.
That would be me.
Yes.
Hello, Internet.
The lead writer for MMOHuts.com, as I'm sure you guys are all too familiar with. And we have a very special guest today that we would love to introduce you to. This is Chris Wilson, and your job is...
I'm the managing director of Grinding Gear Games, so I was one of the initial co-founders, and basically I run the company and oversee both the business side and making sure that the games and expansions we release get delivered on time and so on.
Fantastic. And we are super excited to have you here with us today. Of course, we're going to be asking you some questions about Path of Exile and some questions that are not about that are decidedly not about Path of Exile.
I have a really important question.
I would love to hear it. Let's go.
Is there a sort or an auto group function for my stash, or am I just gonna have to manually adjust everything every time?
It has to be done manually, and we actually see that as a feature. And the reason for this is that we want the items in the game to be very important to the players. We want them to feel like they own something when they've got these items. And so we want people to have to manipulate them and move them around like they're heavy and cumbersome real-life things, because we feel that as soon as it's auto-sortable, suddenly it's kind of just a list of data, and it gets simplified down to like a net worth total, whereas we want it so you actually have to like feel the presence of each item, and there's kind of a cost associated with having them. And in return, we feel that makes it more meaningful to have the good ones.
Oh, I just mean like my crafting stuff.
Oh, yeah,
We
no.
have-
Same rule applies, I imagine.
I hate
We actually do have some stash tabs that make it a little easier to sort your crafting items and so on. That's one of the few things that we do monetize in the game. So you can purchase a currency stash tab that lets you store all of your crafting currency items in a much simpler way.
I'm gonna have to do that because it's starting to drive me mad. They all look just slightly different, so they're all separate. And they're all blue.
Somebody is saying that the stream is looking a little jittery. Oh dear. Let me have a quick look here. Jay, can you see if the stream looks okay on your end?
Oh yeah, let me refresh. I have it paused.
It shouldn't be too bad. I am streaming at a fairly high bit rate. I might need to bring it down for YouTube because right now it's at my Twitch bit rate.
I only stream to YouTube at like I think 2800, but I also do the same for Twitch.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah, it's kind of jittery on my end as well.
I'm gonna bring it down and see if that'll help. So give us just a second, guys. We'll be all right, cool. There we go. Yeah, YouTube was telling me, hey, consider using a lower bit rate. Yeah, I just did lower the bit rate, guys. We should be back.
Okay.
So I would refresh and then see if it's still doing its thing. But anyway, Chris, let's try while we get these technical issues sorted out. What exactly or how exactly did you get started with? Because obviously you're one of the co-founders of Grinding Gear Games. How did this whole thing with Path of Exile come to start? Because I actually don't know a ton about the like logistical history of the game.
So basically, we're a bunch of guys in our early to mid-20s, and we'd played a ton of action RPGs like the Diablo series and Titan Quest and Dungeon Siege and so on. And we were in a situation where we'd finished university, we had training in all the right bits to make games. Like, you know, Jonathan and I were both programmers, Eric was an artist, and we had played voraciously a lot of games in the past. And so we figured, why not naively go and start our own studio and try to make the next big action RPG? Which is a really dumb idea to do because, you know, the chance of success is 1 in thousands, but we didn't know that, and we thought we could do it, so we did it, and that's basically a story of survivorship bias.
Well, I mean,
so you did.
Well, Path of Exile is experiencing some explosive, like, constant growth, especially over the last, like, couple of years. And so, you know, you say that the chances of success are 1 in thousands, but it seems like you guys threaded the needle pretty well, if I do say so myself. What has been the biggest challenge working on the game, like from beginning to now? What has been the biggest challenge you guys have faced?
That's a good question. I think the challenges did vary depending on how we were going. Like before we released the game initially, the challenge was making it, right? Like we weren't as experienced as we thought. It took a lot of careful planning to make sure that the game actually functioned as a game. And so that was a big learning curve, and one of the reasons why it took like 7 years to get it initially released. And since then, the challenges have changed a lot. And thankfully, one of the challenges we don't face is actually coming up with new content for the players. That's something that kind of generates itself these days in terms of there's so many ideas and cool things we can do. But it is always a challenge to make sure we're holding ourselves to the best possible standards that we can, because it's super easy these days to accidentally do something that offends gamers, and we do not want to go anywhere near that. We want to make sure that we're as awesome as we can be in the eyes of gamers and constantly making pro-gamer decisions where possible.
Like not announcing that your new game is a mobile game, for example. Like, just to, I don't know who would do that, but just to, like, throw that out as an example. All right, I'm being told that our frame rate is still really bad.
Yeah, it's still kind of jittery.
I am not positive why that is. Give me a second, guys. I apologize for the technical difficulties. We're going to try to get this sorted out. Give me just a minute. Let's try this one more time, fellas.
Indeed.
All right. Hopefully, we have a better experience now. All right. I've lowered the resolution and the bit rate, so hopefully this will have resolved some issues. Jason, can you see it on your end? Does it look like it got any better?
Let me refresh it.
Chris, I want to apologize, by the way, for the technical issues. We weren't anticipating this.
That's no problem.
We weren't anticipating YouTube to be like, we don't know what streaming is anymore.
It seems like it's going a bit smoother. Maybe
right.
chat can tell me that I'm wrong.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Anyway,
yeah,
it's a lot better. Not perfect, but it's
viewable
good enough.
now.
Yeah,
it's viewable. We'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. Anyway, the important thing is we have more questions. So we talked about the biggest challenge. Jason, I think you said you had a couple of questions as well, right? Like, I want to make sure I don't get you cut off.
If I have something, I'll butt in.
Okay, cool. And we're also going to be taking audience questions as well. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to also drop those in chat.
The only major one that springs to mind is PlayStation 4 or Switch when.
So PlayStation 4 is this month. We're releasing that alongside Path of Exile Synthesis, so we're hoping to have a release date to announce soon. So that one's easy to answer. And Switch is a whole bunch of work that we haven't even looked into yet, so not anytime soon, if at all. But that's, I mean, I'd love to release it on as many platforms as possible. It's just that Switch is. The thing is, Switch is basically a mobile device in terms of specs. Like, it's like a super powerful phone, but it's got the size and performance constraints that require you to kind of have done a bunch of, engine work beforehand. And so we've been targeting the big consoles and so on first, because they're a lot more similar to.
Yeah,
for sure.
That was actually just like I hadn't seen any news on it yet, because I don't really receive our PoE news. I think Colton and Jamie might be the only ones who do. I'll give you guys my email so I can get on that list.
Fair enough.
After the stream, so I can make sure it gets covered on the site expediently.
I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no problem. Oh, by the way, there was. I should have asked this before we went on the air. There was. I'll call it hesitantly an event mentioned the last time you and I spoke. Are we allowed to talk about that, or?
Yeah, this is the ExileCon fan convention you're talking about?
Yeah. I didn't want to blow anything if it hadn't been announced.
Our community do know that we're going to be running it, but we haven't yet put up the page that has the exact dates and list of what's happening. So it's totally fine to talk about it in general terms, but in 2 or 3 work days, we'll be posting the page where they can buy tickets and see the exact stuff that's going on with that. So yeah, happy to talk about it in the meantime.
Okay, cool. So this is the first one, right? Like this is the first ExileCon?
That's right. Yep, ExileCon 2019 in November in New Zealand will be the first fan convention that we've run, and it's terrifying to try to set one of these up.
Oh, I bet.
I can't even imagine logistically what that looks like.
I get stressed just trying to get people over for D&D. Can you imagine what that would be like?
Yeah, well, the best part was we did our day of planning, and we were very stressed out from it, and we go home and need something to watch on TV to relax. So we load up Netflix, and there's this Fire Festival documentary. So we think that'll be entertaining,
Oh,
and watching that when you're
help.
trying to plan an event.
Well, at least you learned what not to do.
Yeah. Well, I think the primary thing you need to avoid doing is taking people's money and then not having an event. Like that's from what I understand,
Right.
the big takeaway.
That's key. That's an
We're about
important takeaway.
So we're about to start selling the tickets. So that's certainly the case that we have to make sure we follow through with everything.
Cool. What is the thing that you're most excited about for the convention? Like what if you had to like pick a potential selling point, if you can talk about any, like to like really get people excited, what would you say that would be?
The two things that I'm most excited about are that we get to announce a whole bunch of cool stuff. We've been working on cool things. We want to have a venue to announce them, and we want to do it in a way that's interactive with the fans. Like it's great to go through journalists to talk about new content, and that works really well for most stuff. But we want to try having a direct line to like show our fans in person, sit them down, get them to play it, see the reactions, and really have kind of a genuine person-to-person experience with the 1,500 people that make it to the event. So that's number one. And then number two is I really love doing fan meetups around the world whenever I can. And this is just like a super big one of those where for several days we can just geek out about PoE and be surrounded by people who love the game. And, that's, from my point of view, that's what I'm most excited about. From players' point of view, it's basically, I suspect it's the same thing. It's a chance to get hands-on and to be there when new awesome stuff was announced, and to get to, hang out with developers. We're sending a lot of developers to the event because it's in the same city as our studio. So we have some VIP dinner where we send like 50 developers to hang out with the fans and make sure everyone's doing good talks throughout the event, and there's signing sessions and that kind of stuff.
That is exciting. I just want to go ahead and throw, if y'all are looking for people to cover the event, I just want to go ahead and like, I know a guy is what I'm saying.
Nice. Yes, I'll talk to you about that one later.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm super excited to see what kind of stuff you guys have planned. Obviously, I play a lot of Path of Exile. It's one of the few games I play when I'm not working. In addition to when I am working.
An unhealthy amount.
Yeah. It really is. So
nice.
You obviously play the game as well. This is just kind of more of a fun question than a question about the behind the scenes stuff, really. What is your favorite build right now? Like, what are you running right now?
I have two ways that I play Path of Exile. The first way is that I, at work, will say to the quality assurance department, okay, I need to continue testing this new content before it gets released. Make me some characters that are appropriate at random situations. And I try very hard to try different characters each time. And I get given some pretty surprising stuff. So on one hand, a lot of my Path of Exile play is with a whole range of different weird characters. But then personally, when I play, I kind of default back to Cyclone or Molten Strike melee marauders. Like just the concept of having a guy and he's strong and he's going to have a lot of life and he's going to smack monsters around. The kind of simple brute action RPG gameplay is something that I keep returning to in Path of Exile. And I don't know why I love playing that so much in my private life. Maybe it's because that's the one build I understand how to do properly. Whereas the ones at work intimidate me a lot.
That is a bold claim for somebody who, like helped build this game.
Yeah, well, the game has changed a lot over the years. I try to get as involved as I can in day-to-day changes with the game. A lot of it's focusing on new content where there's quite a good team focusing on the whole build metagame thing. Like, I'll look at the data with them of how build diversity is looking and make recommendations for how they can tweak it, but I'm not hands-on with designing each of the new skills that's added, for example. So a lot of that information I only find out when I'm preparing to talk to the journalists and players about it. So it's kind of cool to see the finished product a few days before other people do. And then there's some nice surprises in there. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know we were doing all this stuff. Happens surprisingly often with regard to things like new skills.
Well, awesome. Hold on. It's Smooth says True Dork. Oh, that's why they're nerfing Cyclone. Chris makes it OP.
Nice.
So obviously, speaking of like nerfing things, one of the things you said to me the last time we spoke was that you were very much in the camp of keeping like these crazy builds that people come up with, you know, ones like spellcast on damage taken and these kind of interesting, mostly we talked about spellcaster builds because that was like a big focus of what's coming in Synthesis, which, by the way, if you haven't seen the video I did about what's coming in Synthesis, go check it out on the channel after the stream's over.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of really cool things, and I know hand casting is going to be a big thing to, I don't want to say lure people away from abusing not casting spells through their character, but it kind of can feel that way. How do you draw the line between something being broken and something being an interesting character build that you don't want to mess too much with? Like, how do you make that distinction?
It is very subtle, actually. And a lot of it comes down to, like, test number one, for example, is how hard is it to put this build together in terms of items, right? Like, if someone spends 1,000 hours more to get the best items in the game and really has to work for it to get something powerful, that's potentially okay. Whereas if any player using the gems they get from the vendor can just throw that together and instantly defeat all the contact, that's potentially quite a bit worse. The next thing comes down to versatility, right? You can make some insane kind of crazy automated builds that are good at killing one particular type of content, and they're incredibly fast at doing like a certain boss, for example, but just suck at the rest of the game. And that's somewhat okay, again, because highly specialized characters are fine. If the character is able to do everything in the game without any particular difficulty, that then is a bigger problem. And then finally, there's the survivability aspect, where a lot of these crazy builds aren't also particularly tanky at the same time. And then there's a risk-reward thing. If they're playing in hardcore, they risk losing their character by playing like this. And if they're playing in standard, there's a risk they'll lose experience, as they start to get higher level when they die, and then they won't be able to reach the top levels of the game. And so we care a lot about valuing all of these factors. If the build can cheaply do all content in the game with no risk, then that's probably not okay. Whereas if it has big drawbacks to it and people have to make some tough decisions, we find a lot of players will settle with a much more moderated comfort build rather than play one of these crazy ones.
Okay, cool. We actually have an audience question. This question is from Rewarp. It says, "Hey there, got a question. Don't know if I can get an answer, but in the new patch Synthesis, will it include reworks or rebalances of the purely melee skills?"
We have very little melee changes coming in Synthesis. I mean, I can't promise there are none because I'm pretty sure the team do, make little tweaks as they see them, and that'll be in the full patch notes when they're posted this Wednesday New Zealand time. But a large amount of the emphasis has been on getting the spellcasting stuff right, and that's partly because the spellcasting stuff has taken a lot of effort to finish, and they haven't really had as much time to go into other small skill tweaks. Having said that, all the new content of things like unique items and so on can affect any other build in the game. So melee characters will still have new things to experience and new stuff to do, new items to find, and build changes and so on. It's just a bit less of a focus for this one. But we have pretty clearly signaled that, melee is one of the things we'll be looking at in the next one. So, it's not too long to wait for changes to that.
Awesome. And then Tark says 3.7 for a dedicated melee focus.
Yes. And there's an interesting thing here where, see, right now everyone's saying, hey guys, you should totally hit melee in 3.7. They said that about spellcasting for 3.6. And so what'll happen is the community will say you should do this thing, and we say absolutely, we'll get on that. And then we work on that for 3 months. But about halfway through, they'll find something else they want and start saying, totally got to do this. And we'll say, yep, if we can, but we're finishing that last one we committed to. And so it often feels like we're one cycle behind what the current trending thing they want us to address is. And it literally happened this time when we said, okay, here's 3.6, all the spellcasting changes just like you wanted. And people were thankful, but some people said, hey, but we wanted melee, you're not listening. And it's quite interesting.
So what you're saying is it's a cycle of swords and souls as old as time itself.
Yes, indeed. But we do hear the feedback about melee, which is for the next one, and it's nice to have 3 months to focus on actually doing a proper set of improvements, because otherwise things boil down to kind of knee-jerk small changes that you can do in a week, and that's not healthy for the game.
Right.
I have a question. sorry to interrupt. I actually do kind of a game-oriented question. One of the things that's sort of, because I'm still fairly new to Path of Exile. I've played it on and off since a couple of years now, but I still feel like I'm really new because I haven't devoted a lot of time to it. One of the reasons why, because it feels very, very daunting to start. There are so many passive skills. There's so many different ways to play each class. Do you have any recommendations for someone new? Something that's fairly easy to get into the game and learn other than, Googling a build?
There are some really good content creators who both stream very beginner-friendly content and also create videos. An example is there's a YouTube channel called Engineering Eternity, which is highly recommended as a new player thing that they can check out. And we don't feel that players need to do this. Like we try to create the game so that they can click on monsters and the monsters die and the systems unveil themselves at appropriate points and so on. But yeah, it is pretty daunting, and we have in the past found that trying to over-explain stuff to new players doesn't really help the situation. Like any tutorialization we've added hasn't moved any numbers whatsoever. It's still going to be a hard game. It's going to require some study. And so we greatly appreciate our community helping out with guides for this kind of stuff. One of the things we try to do with our releases is to call a few new types of builds, like specific archetypes we're introducing. Like there's some specific spellcaster ones we've got as new archetypes in this expansion. And the intention is if the player were to play those, they get a pretty straightforward experience where it's kind of guaranteed that they've got a moderately powerful character and that kind of stuff. And so we try to point to things occasionally and say, this is new and pretty good. Try that out if you don't want to think too hard about crazy builds.
I have a feeling that Tark Cat produces content for Path of Exile. I'm just guessing, but
yes, this is correct. In fact,
I'm just throwing it out there.
I have an interview with him later today.
Oh,
nice.
Mazel tov.
Also, hello. I don't know what I was saying. Hello to somebody in chat, but then I lost their name, so they got shoved up the chat.
Hello, that person.
Hello, that new person who showed up who said something that I'm sorry it got buried.
You know who you are.
At least I thought I saw you.
Because we don't.
Yeah, because we sure don't. But we love you anyway. Okay, so, and I just want to go ahead and throw this out there for any new players who might be watching. In my experience, and I've been playing for a while now, and I have a fair bit. I'm not like an expert, but I have a fair bit of time pumped into it. I would recommend starting with something sort of like what Chris was talking about earlier, sort of like smash the monsters and they die build, like a Marauder using like Cyclone or even like Molten, what is it? Molten, I forget the name of the skill.
Yeah, Molten Strike is really powerful.
Yeah. Because that's a really good, like, especially early game AoE spell, for a typically melee class. You can do lots of cool things with assist gems on that, and it doesn't take a ton of thinking about it. If you build life and strength and damage for two-handed, like for axes or like two-handed weapons or whatever, you're gonna do all right for your first go. Like you might not clear, without looking up a passives guide, you might not clear the super endgame content like your first go, but it's definitely something to get you pointed in the right direction. That's what I started with that, and I started with actually a Frost Pulse Witch build that I feel like isn't super terribly complicated, that I'd recommend for beginners as well.
I've really been enjoying my Witch.
Tech Het says, the main thing I see that new people don't realize how much defensive stats you need. Most high DPS builds spec relatively low into damage-based nodes. Yeah, that is absolutely correct. Like this build that I'm doing right now actually uses a considerable amount of max life upgrades and evasion. Like, and I use armor that's a combo of armor and evasion. So yeah, that's another big thing. Chris, if you had any, this is kind of another new player friendly type of question. If you had any tips about the crafting system for new players, what would they be?
So the crafting in Path of Exile works by you finding these things called currency items, which can either be traded with other players or can be used to actually modify your gear. And there's kind of two aspects to this I want to cover. The first one is that people shouldn't be afraid to try to modify their gear if they feel they can improve it while they're playing through. Like if you're ever using an item that's just white and it has no properties, it's beyond obvious to use an orb of transmutation to make it blue, or use an orb of alchemy to make it yellow, and those are things that will have a big impact on your character. And because players are often told, oh no, save up your crafting stuff until you understand it later, we see people occasionally that have saved it up to the point where their gear is just so bad that they can't actually progress through the game. So don't be afraid to use the orbs. Conversely, they can be traded with other players, and if you go to pathofexile.com/trade and literally search for whatever item you're wanting, you may find it takes less of the currency items to trade for it than you're otherwise expecting. So it's entirely fine to treat trading as a form of crafting for the purposes of starting out playing. And honestly, one of the things about these action RPGs that have trade is because everyone has a surplus of items that aren't good for them but are good for other players, it's quite affordable in terms of, in-game trading to get something that is quite punchy for your character. In terms of general advice with the crafting stuff, there are good YouTube videos that explain exactly the right ways of playing each crafting item, but to some extent it's unnecessary to expand that until later on. Just understand which ones are expensive. You don't want to go using a Mirror of Calandra on one of your one-hand swords just because you need a second sword at level 25.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, cool. Let me see here. Let me see if I can get chat to update. I don't want to... See, I want to give people in chat a chance to ask questions as well, and I want to make sure I don't skip anybody. Okay, I actually do have one more since I don't see anyone's in chat right now. I think everybody has this feeling about a video game where you go to, like, maybe you're picking it up again for the first time in a while, or you are just, like, starting a new character, and you remember one part of the game that makes you kind of go, like, oh, Christ, I have to do that again. Like for me, it happens a lot in Yoshi's Island with the second or third world with the touch fuzzy get dizzy. That might actually be world 1, but I think
that is world 1.
Doing that level is incredibly frustrating for me because I inevitably always make contact. In Path of Exile,
you get dizzy.
There is a specific boss that every time I think, okay, new season, new character, let's do this thing, and then I remember I have to fight old boy on top of the roof, and I think Act 4. I get the act numbers mixed up. Yeah, where he's got these big orbs that spawn, and basically the ground is always covered. Through this again? Basically, the ground is always covered in something that will pretty much kill you unless you're built defensively to start. And it's a lot of running around and having to take 1 or 2 pot shots and then move and then burst down ads and that kind of stuff. And that's fun once you're used to it. But the first few characters I made, I remember that part always made me want to rip my teeth out. What's that part for you? What's the part where you kind of go, ooh, I'm not really looking forward to doing this specific thing again?
This is tricky because if there's something in the game that I'm not looking forward to, then I project this onto my opinions of all the players and yell at people at work until that thing's different. But I have PTSD for most parts of the game. There are, for example, you leave town and there's this boss called Fire Fury, who's the character on the coast who rains some firestorms down on you. For a long period of time back in 2012 or 13, that was incredibly lethal. You stand in that stuff for a couple of seconds and you die. And then in the next area, the Tidal Island, that boss there, Hellrake, would just take you out in a couple of ice spears back in the day when he could kill you in 2 hits. And this carries on, where the necromancers in the prison were just a relentless summoning machine that gives you armies of skeletons to fight against and just impossible to take down. And the elemental caster skeletons in the prison will just take you out in a couple of hits. And we've had situations in Path of Exile's life, rowers charging at you in the mudflats, if they hit you successfully, used to just kill you. And so everything in the game has had a point of being quite dangerous and scary, and so I'm just kind of ready to be killed by anything, if you know what I mean. Every time I see a monster, I think, crap, are we playing that version where this thing's going to rip me immediately? And nowadays, of course, there's been quite enough balance passes at the beginning of the game is a little bit more beginner-friendly, and you don't get killed arbitrarily, but I still get heart rate elevation at places which are completely safe.
Is there one in particular that, really gets you tensed up, that you could think of?
Yeah, there are these bosses, those chicken and bulldog PvP pit monsters that are introduced in Act 4, where I have lost a hardcore character at high levels to a boss version, one of those. And so every time I see the normal version, I just get filled with anger and resentment. And I am very, very careful around those monsters, even though they're not particularly dangerous anymore.
I appreciate that candid answer. Tart Cat says Beta Fire Fury Monka S emote. Jason, did you have any more questions you wanted to go over? I want to make sure you get yours in.
I don't really have anything else. So if you've got something, go for it.
Okay, I do.
I'm just grumbling at my inventory. I have so many things to identify.
Now, you guys, we talked a little bit earlier about balance, and I know we've talked about the spell casting and how that was a big thing you guys focused on overhauling in Synthesis. And, you know, the audience is calling for melee stuff, or at least they were, and you guys apparently missed it, if you ask Reddit. So, are there any builds or things right now that you guys are kind of side-eyeing that, like, in specific, that kind of make you go, maybe something is afoot here that we should be privy to, that you can tell us about a little bit? Give us
There are certainly things. There are certainly things that prompt this, but I do not know which ones I can talk about necessarily. Partly because if I speculate that such and such a build has to get nerfed, that's going to cause significant waves in the community if I prove to be wrong. Like if the team on Monday said to me, "You said we were going to fix whatever, but no, it's actually fine. You misunderstood," and then I'm the bad guy.
Right.
But the good news
I'm sorry,
is,
I didn't mean to put you on that spot where you
okay.
might potentially be the bad guy.
There's also the thing where I don't actually know the answer to this because they've been in haste and before the patch notes, which are ready soon, before the patch notes are posted, they've been making the myriad small balance changes they've intended to make. And it's getting to the point where there's like 100 changes a day going in right now. So I can't tell you which things have been eyed but not actually fixed yet. Having said that, they always have their hit list of things that are troublesome, and there's often a plan to resolve it, right? Like, they don't just want to nerf something arbitrarily, they want to do it in a way that makes sense in the greater context of the game. And so if they see a particular build that has some problems that they'd like to address, it's better to, like, say, oh yeah, we're going to do a complete totem overhaul 3 patches from now. Or that's not true, but, you know, we'll find some way to address the greater issue and fix that build at the same time, rather than just arbitrarily nerf it for, you know, fun reasons.
Right. Cool. Sorry, I just died. Just died to a massive amount of guards. I got
That's what the game is about.
Right. I'm playing my Toxic Rain Herald of Agony Ranger, and I got too big for my britches. I'm like, I can pull another group. That's fine. And spoiler warning,
turns out
it was not fine. It was not even a little bit fine. All right. Man, this is... I wish I knew why my computer hates load screens so much. It just does.
You're playing on an SSD?
No, but I should be.
It does actually help quite a lot.
Well, it's not just this game. It hates them for every video game.
God help you if you try to load Smite.
Oh, yeah, it takes like a day and a half for me to get past the splash screen for Smite.
Before we stream it, I tell him like 9 hours in advance, go load up the game.
Yeah, which it's so weird because like I'm rocking an i7 7700K. I've got a 960 GTX, like 16 gigs of RAM, DDR4. Like I'm in, my machine's decent,
And
but
you
for
can't
some
play games for shit.
Yeah, nope. Not even a little bit.
I suspect it's speed getting the data off the drive. Regular hard drives both copy files more slowly into memory and also have slow seek times to find the files on the drive, whereas SSDs are blazingly fast at both. So,
yeah, so I need to stop being a
like,
plebeian and like just invest.
There were some. You could put just a cheap small one in as a second drive. But the thing is, like, as easy as it is for us to say that, we still have to make the game as good as possible on a regular hard drive, especially because the current console generation don't necessarily have SSDs, and so the hard drives that are in consoles often aren't as good as the ones that a PC enthusiast would build on their own machine, and therefore we have to make sure the game is very playable on those consoles, and that benefits the regular PC players who don't yet have an SSD. So the cheap cop-out answer of me telling the players individually go and spend a few $100s to play my game isn't actually very good. And we're continuing to improve this.
I don't think that would go well.
It's funny that you say that because Tart Cat says, I hope I'm saying that right. says, once again, Chris pushing his SSD market shares.
I've been buying a ton of Intel and Samsung before this.
Fire-breathing rubber ducky says, Path of Exile is the reason I bought an SSD. Teleplayer says, hello. Hello, Teleplayer. And then Tartcat says, I would honestly rather drop my second monitor than my SSD. If I had to get rid of something from my setup, I guess is what he's implying. Yeah.
They're pretty good.
Both of my monitors are smoke damaged. I need to replace. There's more than a few things on this build that need to be replaced. All right. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are just joining us, if you we're here with obviously with Chris Wilson. More or less, you said you're the operating manager.
Yeah, the managing director. It's like the New Zealand term for CEO.
Yeah, and for Grinding Gear Games. One of the co-founders as well of Grinding Gear Games. If you guys have questions for him, please feel free to get them in. Drop them in chat. As long as they're not like painfully offensive, we will get them answered. Chat's kind of quiet enough right now that we can get them in. Teleplayer says, "Have you played the Swordsman X yet?" No, I have not.
I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
I've watched Samurai X, if that helps.
Yeah. Oh,
I suspect it doesn't.
Chris, do you mind if we squeeze in a couple of non-directly Path of Exile related questions?
Sure, happy to answer anything.
I'm sorry, say again.
Happy to answer anything.
Yeah. So are you in the are you pro anime? Do you enjoy anime? This is something we ask pretty much everybody who comes on this show.
If someone recommends me some anime or wants to watch it with me, then I will absolutely do it. But I don't seek out anime. So it's one of those things where I kind of just want to see the best.
Yeah, you want someone to curate it.
Exactly.
Goofy says, "Hey Colton, how's it going?" Pretty well. Also, hey Jason, long time.
Hello, Gopi.
Yeah. Good to see you, Gopi, or hear from you, I guess, is in the more technical sense. Okay, then I guess my next question's moot, because I was going to ask you what your favorite anime is, and remind you that
Corey in the house.
Yeah, and why is it Corey in the house or Drake and Josh? Either of which are acceptable answers to this question.
I have watched few enough anime that's like, I don't know, I enjoyed Evangelion, and that's kind of, we're talking a decade ago.
Right?
I need to drink really heavily before I watch Evangelion.
Yeah.
That show messes with my head.
Yeah, it is a bit hardcore. My wife is very much into anime, though, so I do see bits and pieces of what she's watching. But I couldn't tell you what the shows are called.
Okay, cool. Oh, I think I've done this screen already. Oh, Jason actually was mentioning something to me earlier that sparked an idea for a question that, like, I kind of just came up with on the fly. So, Jason was having a hard time finding what you were doing the way forward, right?
Yeah.
And
I still haven't completed it, even though I'm in Act 2.
Yeah,
just wandered past
I was trying to explain to him how the map screen worked, like, and I was doing so rather unsuccessfully. Are there any like tips you might recommend someone like Jason who's new for like how to make the best use of those, like your map and your quest log screen and that kind of thing?
So the intention is that it shows you a set of active quests, and when you click on one, it shows you which areas you need to go through to get there. So if you have quests, like there's things like the way forward, where when you connect the two acts together, you get a skill point, where we list it there. If they want the skill point, they can get it, but it's also fine if they don't want it now and just discover it later, because that's just a fast thing they can go back and do and get a skill point and feel good about like being rewarded quite heavily for 3 minutes of work. And so we don't want
my whole job. Got it.
Very nice. We don't want to direct the player too much. Like we don't want to say to them, "Oh my God, you have quests. You've got to go do your quests." Our goal is basically say, "Here's a world. Go explore." And if you are saying, "Well, what's something I can do now? I'm kind of lost," then they can go there and pick a quest off the list and go and do it. And that will either progress the plot forward and get them to the next area, or give them some reward for it.
Gotcha.
We have a very early 2000s design approach to this kind of stuff. We very, very much dislike hand-holding. And, there was a game which shall remain nameless that I was playing a while ago, which had an arrow showing you where you should go all the time. And that was cool, like very convenient. I can kind of watch TV while I'm playing. And then when the arrow was not there, I felt helpless and horrible, and I'm going to quit this damn game. And so our preference is to kind of start how we mean to continue, which is the player has to think a bit about it.
Cool.
Makes sense.
Turn on my Herald of Agony aura. I thought for sure it was on, but okay. I guess it's not. So da-da-da-da-da-da. All right, now I need to go to the marketplace. Sorry, I need to like look at my map for a second, so y'all give me a second. Does the new private league feature satisfy Chris's desire for an insane difficulty mode of PoE?
It does not satisfy this, and part of that is because we actually turned off the really hard mods just before releasing it because we didn't want the community to feel that they had to turn all of that stuff on. So our plan was we put some moderate difficulty stuff out there with it, and then we turn the hard stuff on later, which is still coming soon, hopefully. But yeah, there's plenty more places that system is going in the future.
Well, that's certainly good to hear. I, of course, am still terrified of the normal difficulty. I have not actually played a hardcore character yet. Despite having hours played in Path of Exile in the triple digits, I have not played a hardcore character yet because I'm scared, and I'm manning up.
The system they're referring to there is this thing called private leagues. So basically, like, let's say you and your friends wanted to play some Path of Exile, and you wanted to have your own little, like, mini economy to play in, where you can trade with each other and do all that stuff, but you don't want it that items can come in from elsewhere. Because there's that thing where you start playing a game with your friends, and then you go to sleep, and when you wake up in the morning, the guy is incredibly high level and has all these items, and you begin to wonder whether he traded with other players, or was given them, or bought them from a website, or that kind of stuff. And so with a private league, it's only you guys in that economy. There's no way that someone can get items from outside. But in addition, we allow the people to make the game harder. So you guys can play Path of Exile in your own little world with all these things that make the game more difficult. So you can kind of have bragging rights for, finishing the content on a much more difficult setting. And so that's the private league feature they're talking about, which is designed for kind of groups of friends or, a whole bunch of people from a company who want to play Path of Exile together and have their own bubble to do it in, and so on and so on.
Like, grinding gear.
Yes. I do not know the extent to which our staff have private leagues set up. I think it's because we have our crazy test servers in the office where they have access to future sweet content that, so they'll just do their playtesting there.
Right. I got you, Gopi. It is on now. Apparently I did not have Herald of Agony on, which is like 50% of this build, so I don't know how I was...
Rewarp has another question, Colton.
Oh, yeah. Rewarp says, hey, Back, I got another question. Are you planning for any improvement of your PC servers in the future? Talking about things like lag and ping issues.
Always. Constantly, every day, 2 or 3 hours of discussion with people about how we can improve server performance. And there's good reasons for this. Not only is it one of the things that heavily affects player experience, but it also costs a lot of money for all these servers. So it's one of those things where we think, if we do this plan here, it'll make the game better for the players and save us $1 million. And so there's a lot of incentive for us to improve server performance. And this is a constant thing we're talking about. I mean, we don't discuss it with the community, really, because A, it's our obligation to improve server performance and our financials and that kind of stuff, our business. But also because the second we bring up server performance, it's just inviting 4,000 people to tell us that the game is terrible. So it's one of those topics we just try to fix and improve. I mean, I think the server performance is very good, but very good is far away from completely amazingly good and saves us a lot of money and has no overhead for the players. So this stuff we're doing, I mean, like, for example, at the moment, we've been working on trying to get realm capacity up to make sure that if there are other launches as large as Betrayal was, that we don't have to have players in a queue. Because with the Betrayal launch, we hit our theoretical maximum realm capacity for Path of Exile, as in if we had more players, we couldn't have serviced them. And so that's something we've been working on, so that if, there's a really big spiky release in the future, we don't get caught short on that.
Right. Gopi says, "Good. Do you guys have any points in the shop?" Oh, no, I do not. I keep telling myself I'm gonna buy some, and then I keep forgetting. But I'm also like poor and in college, so like money's not always like the most readily available resource in my bag, so to speak. But I keep telling myself I'm going to, and I probably will this week. Because there are a couple of cosmetic items that I really want, like some footprint and spell effects that I've been eyeballing really hard. By the way, how obviously monetization is a hot button issue for people. People like to get bent out of shape over free-to-play games, charging money for literally anything. But I feel like, and there are probably other content creators that deal a lot more focused on Path of Exile that would agree that you guys are pretty much the gold standard for how it should be done. Simply because the only things that you can get are things that don't really affect gameplay other than the minor convenience of currency or other stash tabs. Which, I mean, I've lived this long without and wasn't 100% sure what they did other than potentially more storage space. Because I've been playing for a while, but I'm still a novice. How did you guys, like, when you started with, like, monetizing the game, was that was probably always the goal? Or, like, how did you guys arrive at this standard that you've set up for how you monetize?
Well, from the beginning, we had this crazy plan that Path of Exile would be free. And this was a plan before there were really free games like this. And our goal was, if we're free and everyone else costs money, people have to play our game if they don't want to, put that money down. And then, there were games that were free for quite a number of years before we eventually released Path of Exile. But from the beginning, our intention was that we completely separate the concept of monetization from gameplay. Like, the rule was, your monetization cannot affect any decisions the game designers would make. Because let's say you've got some game that has, like, experience potions, where you drink the potion and you get some experience gain for an hour, which we clearly, I want to make it clear we don't have anything like that. But if you did, then there's a question of, to make more money and be a more successful business, we have to nerf experience gain in the game until it's unrewarding to actually play normally, and you have to buy the thing. And that's just a terrible direction to go down. And so from a company point of view, we've completely separated the people that decide what, skins and stuff we're selling, so that there is no way that there could be any interference between the two areas. Like, at no point do any of the content designers really particularly understand what particular monetization stuff we've got coming up in the future, though it has no way of affecting the gameplay as well. And the only slight concession to this is that some of the long-term storage space options that we offer are a minor convenience compared to having to have multiple Path of Exile accounts, for example. Because you could register 10 accounts, store your items across all of their free tabs, but we provide the ability to purchase extra tabs on your main account, including some tab types that make it slightly easier to store certain types of collections of items more easily. And that's pretty much the only thing that in any way comes close to gameplay. But it's worth noting that that isn't something that helps you while you're on the field. Like, in the regular version of Path of Exile, you're not able to purchase a larger inventory, for example, to actually help you while you're fighting monsters and to hold more items. This is just like a long-term archival of your hoard of items that you can affect.
Awesome. Also, we have a comment and a question from the audience. Gopi says, the Synthesis supporter packs are so cool. Tarkcat says, I'm curious actually, what is Chris's go-to MTX set? I actually quite enjoy the Fire and Ice armor sets that were from the mystery box that was a few seasons ago. That was one where I actually bought a bunch of mystery boxes myself to make sure I'm experiencing the experience correctly, and managed to get all the bits eventually that I needed for both armor sets to make the combined one. So I'm very proud of that, because I had to beat a lot of RNG to put that together. You're really fighting an uphill battle, huh?
Well, the randomness can be brutal.
Yeah.
God, I know it.
Alrighty, let's see here. Attack speed. Okay, I probably need to start going that way on my tree. Alrighty, it actually looks like we are running out of time, so I do want to thank you very much, Chris, for being here with us.
Absolutely.
It's been a blast. We hope you've enjoyed yourself as much as we have.
Absolutely, it's really good, and great questions, both from you guys and from the audience.
Oh, thank you. I had been thinking on them for a couple of days, so I hope, at least, I hope they were decent. Thank you guys in the audience for tuning in, and asking your questions. Yeah, for turning up and asking your questions. That kind of support means a lot to us here at MMOHuts. And you're just cool people in general. We like you. And if you guys want to see more cool interviews and videos and stuff like that, subscribe, click the bell. You can do all the stuff everybody tells you to do at the end of the video.
You've seen a YouTube video before.
Yeah,
you know what
just
to do.
Pretend I said all the stuff they say. It's like, you guys know what that actually does help us a lot when you do those things, and we appreciate you and we love you. And we will see you next time right here on MMOHuts.com.